to the sensitivity of being a 911 dispatcher, I can't actually show the dispatch floor of where the audience will be because it has sensitive information of our calls and stuff like that, and information I can't release to the public. But I have about 15 people out there. What I'm doing is I'm doing the project in here, and it's live streaming out there to where they are while they're still trying to work and stuff. So, but we have about 15 people outside. Luckily, it's a slower day, so they'll be able to focus on what's going on. So hopefully that counts. I'm hoping so, but we'll see. So I will set the camera up in front so you can see the projector. I have to be over here because we have no mouse clicker to change the slides. So yep, let's get started on that. Okay, so securing the scene. A big part of our job is making sure that our scenes are secure. And being a dispatcher, we deal a lot with the public, but we have to deal with the caller before help arrives, and we want to make sure that that scene is being secure. Now the issue is that a lot of our officers are kept on scene for a long time, and they're kept on scene for a long time, so it ties up our officers, and because of that, we feel like they're taking too long or anything like that. So this is going to explain kind of what goes into that and why it does take that long. Okay, just me as a background. I am a 911 dispatcher. Clearly, we're here at VEC, VECC, and we dispatch for 7 different cities. And so yeah, I also work in the fingerprinting department due to my communications class. We had to do a interview with him, and that way I got the internship through that. So that's pretty cool. And I will get my criminal justice associates in May, and I know how to process evidence, and I've done plenty of ride-alongs with friends. Okay. So we want to keep the scene as it is. One story that that sticks to mind is there was a elderly female, and she had a break-in in her house, but she was ashamed of how her house looked. So because of that, she cleaned up most of the incident. So when the officers got there, they didn't have to come to a messy house. Well, because of that, it destroyed a lot of the evidence that they had because of the placement of things, and they could see the way and where the perpetrator moved to. Now, because of that, it can lower the charges, actually, opposed to a burglary. Now they're looking at theft. Officers aren't done with their job when the person is pronounced dead or the stolen vehicle is recovered. It makes more time and effort than after that occurs. So after they discover a recovered vehicle, it doesn't just end there. They have to contact different sources and everything to get that back to the right person, do evidence, and things like that. Same with the person. Even if EMS is sent out and they are pronounced dead, they have to do the photography of it, the scene. They have to take pictures of the scene, and they do. Officers do reports every day. One of my friends who's an officer just did a report on a theft, and it took him 6 pages because of how detailed it was, which takes up a lot of time. Okay, so through this, we're going to look at our key points, which are pre-arrival scene safety, crime scene, and court. Okay, there are some graphic pictures in here, so just beware. Okay, so pre-arrival. As a dispatcher, we know pre-arrival as pre-arrival instructions such as CPR, agonal breathing, anything like that. But pre-arrival to officers means things that happen before they get there, okay? So we want to make sure that we don't disturb anything at the scene, okay? Which is an instruction that we do give all our callers, but it's very important that we tell them when it's appropriate. If they're, that can mean that they need to leave a scene on a burglary. Sometimes we ask them, I tell my callers just not to touch anything else until leave the scene, because you actually leave things behind, and we don't want to contaminate the crime scene. And then already obstructed evidence, we don't want to move any of that. And times management, so we need to make sure that we're getting our officers out in a timely manner, that things won't be affected due to that. Okay, life over property. Okay, but we do care about, so say that we have a hanging, we want to make sure that we're cutting that person down and assessing, trying to save them instead of keeping the scene as it is. Now, when we tell them to cut them down and loosen the noose, we don't tell them to untie the noose because we don't want to, that's evidence, and we don't want to obstruct that, okay? We want to make sure that our caller is not in danger, okay? Traffic accidents, we want to make sure that we tell them to move their vehicle to a safer location. And by doing that, it, messes up the scene. So we want to make sure that we're telling them at least to take a picture, but we also don't want to cause any more accidents, okay? With structure fires, we want to have them get out of there as soon as possible because we don't want anything else to happen. Now, say the flame has already been put out, we don't want them to run that pan underneath water or anything like that because those are still evidence, okay? Obvious echo. So everyone here knows what an obvious echo is. But with the obvious echo, we want to make sure that scenes left as it's found. Okay, so if you are on a hanging and you get that call and they're beyond any help, we don't want them to cut them down and try CPR. We want them to just leave it as it is, so when forensics comes in, they'll be able to document that, where the body was, all that things, okay? Moving evidence to attempt to save lives, okay? That's important that you notate that in your calls, though, like hangings or overdoses. We want to make sure that they're out of danger, okay, but we also want to make sure that all that is still there. Such as if you have an overdose where they start to seize and we tell you to move dangerous objects away from them, we need to make sure that we let the officers know, hey, they had to move this, so when they did seize, they didn't hurt themselves by accidentally poking themselves with a needle again. All right. Sometimes you're gonna have weather issues though, especially in outdoor scenes. Okay. So we want to make sure that the caller has a good memory on how the scene was set up, that they'll be able to retell the officers if anything's obstructed. Okay. Especially if it rains or anything like that. Pay attention to they have to pay attention to details also. Where placement of bodies are, where their vehicles were at when they were in their crash, anything like that. And because of that, we actually, if they can do those, we can recreate the scene, which will help us later on in our court area. Okay, the next topic is our crime scene. Okay, we need to get, you only get one shot at the scene. Okay, now on that, forensics will go out. Okay, so sorry, this is a very graphic photo, but as you can see up here, this is the photo with the two bodies here, and then they have to move them because they're dead. Then we have to do another picture without the bodies there so we can show both of these. Anyway, so we need to make sure that you have good lighting in there, and that the photographs are one of the longest process that we have. So we want to make sure that we have good lighting. As you can see, the lighting is different, and so we have to use different cameras for that to make sure that it's coming across as a clear picture for when we go to court. And actually, when forensics show up, we go in a clockwise position. We do an overall photo, and then we work our way clockwise, taking photos. And you actually want to take photos of something that's already in the scene. So when you go to the next frame, you can see that it's in that frame. So if I were to take a picture of the door, the next picture would have to have part of the screen in it. So you can see that if you pan it all together, it will make one big picture that flows very easily. That way they don't think that we're jumping around in the scenes either. We also don't delete any photos because we don't want to think that we're obstructing evidence as officers. Trace evidence, okay, so fingerprints are very important. I know many of you have heard about them, and DNA and fibers, but it's more than just that, because those things are just little bits of evidence that you have to piece together to make the scene. And it's just because there's a fingerprint on something doesn't mean that you've caught your culprit, okay? So there's actually a fingerprinting basis called AFIS, and AFIS has people's fingerprints, but every time that we get a fingerprint, usually it's not a perfect print, it's a partial print, and you'll get multiple hits on that print when you run it through AFIS, or AFIS. And because of that, we have to start looking at other things. on what those people were charged for, if this could be them, and investigate from there. So you may have several suspects once you've done that. Okay, DNA is also very important, blood and all that things. Same thing though, you can run DNA and get multiple results on that. So it's important that we don't get contaminated blood, especially if we have a victim and a suspect that both bled. We want to make sure that we're trying to separate those to make sure that we get the right DNA. Now, if that does happen, we do have, we do a controlled. So we do, when we test it, we do just, we do one that has nothing on it and one that has the victim's blood on it. So we can take those out because it's a big chart that comes up, and you have to take out the ones that match up with the victim, saying this is the victim, the rest of it must be the suspect. Fibers and marks, so this would be footprints, anything like that, fibers from your shirts, hair follicles, anything like that, that can help us. Actually, the way that your hair is grown can determine your ethnicity, because of the different, the cell structure of it actually. So those are all very important, and once again, going kind of back to the pre-arrival, every time you step anywhere, you have left evidence somewhere, whether it's your skin sloughing off, your hair's kind of just falling off, dirt under your nails getting on the floor, anything like that that can actually be at the scene. Court is a very important part of the process because it's more of the ending part, but it takes a long time. And not all scenes are taken to court right away because they have to gather their evidence, defense has to get their evidence together, and so does the prosecutor, and they have to go through this big process on that. So we want to make sure that that our presentation is key, okay? The whole point of court is to make sure that it's beyond a reasonable doubt. We can recreate the scenes for something like court presentation, okay? We can use 3D photos, which is what you see here. We have props that we can set up on, like say someone was pushed over a balcony, we can actually reconstruct a balcony and put it in the courtroom, and they can see, and we can recreate that with dummies and stuff like that. Witnesses are also important, and that includes the victims also as a witness. People see things as they, and you know, they may say one thing and that's what they really believe happened, but that may not be what happened. So witnesses are kind of, they're circumstantial evidence, they're not hard evidence. So presenting your evidence though is very important. If you have a jury, you're going to want to make sure you're not using a lot of terminology. The terminology, if you use too many scientific terminology and they don't know what you're talking about, they're going to get very lost and bored, and they're not going to be able to make come to a good conclusion on guilty or not guilty. You need to relate the evidence to the crime and kind of tell them how you got there. Just like I was saying, the fingerprints and the fibers, they're just pieces of evidence. You need to piece them all together so it makes a picture. And you need to make, because you don't have the same, you can't take them to that scene again. So you need to make sure that when you are speaking about the scene, that it's painting a picture for them, that they'll be able to visualize. Okay, so just from this presentation, just take away to preserve the scene. Okay, we want to make sure that the evidence is the key, and we want to make sure we're not obstructing that. Okay, and depending on how you present the evidence that you've gotten, can make or break your scene. And so it's very important that we get as much evidence as we can that's non-tainted. So really it starts with us as dispatchers. And there's a lot more that goes into these scenes than we think. We're just the beginning part. We're the first responders. And that's why the officers take so long on some of these, is because it's a very long process and we need to make sure that we're doing it correctly. Alright, well thank you so much for letting me speak with you guys. Okay, if you have any questions, I'll be out there on the dispatch floor to come talk to you about them, okay? Thank you.